Hi, my name is Mark Widgery. I'm a GP and one of the MedLink co-founders, and I'd like just a few minutes to show you around the MedLink automated recall system. Just to put this in a little bit of context, MedLink has been around since 2019. We're currently live in 220 practices, covering about 2.4 million patients across the UK. And we've done a lot of assurance work with Crown Commercial Services. We're listed on the G-Cloud framework. Worked also with NHS Digital as well as certain third parties. But most importantly, our product is fully integrated with EMIS Web, allowing us to deliver a fully automated recall system. This slide is just to give you a bit of a framework around the next few minutes as we look through the way that we automate the search function, identifying patients due their recall, getting invites into the patient's hands automatically, the online review process for patients, and then how that data comes into the practice for clinician assessment, and finally coded automatically to the record. So when we say automated searches, we're not meaning that we're providing you with EMIS searches. We're actually using the link that we have with EMIS to do a direct analysis of each patient's record. We do this within the patient's birth months. It doesn't actually matter if you've used that historically, but this is about cohorting patients and spreading work throughout the fiscal year. You decide on the scope of the recall system, and so it's available for all of the QOF long-term conditions as well as pill and HRT checks. And you decide on which conditions are included in the recall system depending on your particular setup. Obviously, the more conditions you select, the more comprehensive the recall system is going to be. As well as selecting the conditions themselves, you can also then decide on additional what we call physical checks. That's bloods, foot check, urine ACR, that are a necessary part of the review process but can't be completed by patients necessarily on their own at home on their own device. All of this system is built around the QOF business rules. So when we're analysing the record, we're not just looking for diagnostic codes, but we're also looking for condition resolved codes, exception codes, and whether their review's already been completed. This is customizable for you as a practice, and so you can exclude specific cohorts of patients, such as those who are in care homes or housebound, from the automated recall system if you have a different setup in place for those patients. And we actually allow you to exclude individual patients from the recall system using specific codes as well. The aim of this analysis that we run within each patient's birth month is to look. A standard EMIS search gives us a list of patients for a particular review that's due. Actually, our search function is slightly different. We're ending up with a list of conditions due for each individual patient. And what we're aiming to then do is to be able to build a personalised multimorbidity online review for each patient, covering all of their outstanding recall. So that instead for a patient dealing with multiple different conditions throughout the fiscal year in a sort of piecemeal exercise, we can consolidate that all into a single annual review. Once we've run that analysis, we then want to get that review into the patient's hands straight away. We want there to be no delay between that. And so actually on the same day, we then send out an invite to the patient asking them to engage with the online system. That's using communication details that we pull out of the record. That can either be by email or by SMS and or by automated landline call as well. And we're in the process of integrating with the NHS app as well. The invite contains the link to the patient's personalised online review, and you can see this link format here is specific to that patient for an online review that we've built covering all of their outstanding recall. However, not all patients are necessarily going to want to engage online, and so we want to make sure your staff in the practice are aware of the analysis that's been done and the invite that's been sent out. So we code this into the EMIS record at the same time as we send the invite, what's called the recall status consultation. It shows a line here for each of the relevant conditions for the patient and whether or not the review is due and the logic why, which codes have triggered that. It contains the invite codes for each of the conditions that have been included, as well as details of how they were invited and the link that they were sent. And based on your settings as well, it also includes detail of the physical checks that are required for those particular conditions. And so if a patient does decide to contact the practice following the invite being received, your staff have got a full record of exactly what the outcome of the analysis was and what's due for that patient. We have a recall dashboard which shows you progress throughout the fiscal year of the recall process. You can see just a few details here. We routinely pull the March birth months forward in the year and run them in April or whenever you start partway through the fiscal year to prevent end of QOF year pressures. You can see a progress bar showing the work throughout the year, and we send invites out on every working day of each month. And you're actually able to move birth month cohorts around as well. So it might be that you want to pull January and February months earlier in the year, or just move things around to deal with staff absence, for example. And so you've got freedom to do that, to move those cohorts to allow you to configure it for your practice purposes specifically. And then once a month is complete, this download CSV button appears here, and this allows you to actually download a spreadsheet showing both all the work that's been completed, so a list of patients who were invited, and actually whether they've engaged with the online system and completed it or not. But most importantly, a list of patients for whom the online system was not appropriate. And that action required tab of the spreadsheet that's downloaded comes really in two groups. The first group is those who've been excluded because of the settings that we saw earlier, as a patient who was excluded actively from the system, or where no contact details were available in the record, or where there was a lack of consent for use of those contact details. And so typically for a practice, between 1% and 3% of your patients will need some further interaction, further input from your admin staff, but the vast majority will have their invites sent automatically. We then send a second invite to patients 2 to 4 weeks later, depending on whether they engage online or not, and code that second invite to the record, ensuring that all of your patients will receive at least one, if necessary, 2 coded invites to the record to fulfill that minimum QOF requirement. Once their invites are in the patient's hands, it's time for them to actually complete their review. This is just to give you a sense of the scope of the automated recall system. Everything in the left-hand column here is included in the multimorbidity recall system. All of the long-term conditions for both QOF and some that are non-QOF, as well as COCP and POP and HRT reviews. And the conditions on the right are also available, and in fact, in its pre-integration format, MedLink involved invites for all of these conditions being sent out manually to patients. That's still the case for those on the right because they don't fit into the annual review process, but there's very little need to send manual invites for those on the left, assuming that they're included in your recall process. From a patient perspective, once they click on or tap on that link that you saw earlier in the invite, it loads straight into this page. You can customize the pages, putting a banner there for your practice details, upload a video just to reassure patients that they've come to a legitimate invite that's from you, and maximizing the patient engagement. Patients enter their date of birth just to confirm their identity, and then come into this central navigation page, which includes the list of all of their conditions, as well as an additional section that includes things like medication review, blood pressure submissions, lifestyle questions, which are common across multiple conditions and prevents any repetition. So for the patient, instead of having a piecemeal exercise of multiple different reviews during the year, it's consolidated into a single annual review, and there's no repetition or duplication from a patient perspective when dealing with multimorbidity. We've worked hard to make the MedLink content engaging, not just text and questions, but also information for patients. So for example, here, patient selects their inhaler type, their spacer type if relevant, and they're shown a relevant video to reinforce inhaler technique. At the end of each condition, we ask a free text question, anything else to add, and then we ask patients how they would like to complete their review, whether they would like to discuss things further with you, or whether they're happy to complete their pill check, whatever it may be, without further discussion if appropriate. It's important to mention we're never making decisions on your behalf. Our role is data gathering from the patient and presenting that to you to allow efficient clinical decision making. Once the patient has completed their online review, bear in mind that as part of the analysis, we've also identified physical checks, bloods, foot check, urine ACR, that are necessary but obviously can't be completed by patients at home on their own device. And so this screen is then shown to the patient, and you can configure these instructions to allow patients to arrange these physical checks as part of the review process. You can configure online appointment booking for patients for blood tests, foot check appointments, and instructions for dropping in a urine ACR. And those self-book links can then be directly accessed by patients to book directly into the relevant slot type that you've specified without having to call reception or take up any admin time. The system works out of the box with signposting to NHS resources, but you can configure those signposting links for more locally commissioned services, making it a more engaging and a more useful experience for your patients. And we also incorporate enhanced services where they're relevant, so the NHS Digital Weight Management Programme is included, identifies relevant patients for that process, and gathers consent and then gives you a suggested code once their referral is sent to your local services. And so this allows you actually to generate revenue from using the system. So that's a quick look at the patient perspective. And bear in mind that by this point in the process, beyond the initial setup, which takes less than an hour, and we can actually support you with Teams calls to do that if you like, your staff have had nothing to do. The system has run fully automatically. We've run the searches within the patient's birth month, identified their conditions, created their review, sent out their invites, and they've engaged online with their review. The one part of this 5-step process that we cannot and frankly will not do on your behalf is this one here, the clinician assessment of patient-submitted data. We're not an algorithmic service making decisions on your behalf. We're gathering data from your patients and presenting it to you for decision making. And that's what we'll look at now. The data that comes back into the practice comes into the MedLink inbox. This is the primary way we've designed for practices to be able to deal with patient responses efficiently. The principle is that although the patient has a one-stop shop with multiple conditions, in most practices different conditions are dealt with by different clinicians, and therefore we split them up into the separate sections, like here patient has completed their asthma and their diabetes. Within this column we show where the physical checks are pending, and we actually want to make sure that when you're coming into these responses you've not just got the patient answers but all of the appropriate data available to you. And so we check the record 3 times a day for any pending items inside the inbox, and we actually send reminders to patients if they haven't arranged appointments to get those booked, so that we can never guarantee that your patients are going to engage with this, but we can maximize the likelihood of patients actually engaging with those appointments and getting all of that data gathered. You can filter these lists, and so you can set them to be assigned to individuals or teams, and so typically you'll go into the list and filter it and filter out those that are pending here, so that you only see those that are relevant to you and those that have got completed data. Once you click into one of those responses relevant to you, this is the sort of screen that you'll see. On the left you've got patient submitted data, on the right you've got actions that you can take, and we'll just take a quick look through this screen now. So first of all, you can see here that this response, the diabetes one that I'm looking at, has been assigned to a nursing team here. And I'm part of that team, and you can decide as a practice who you assign that to and who the members of those teams are. The patient has done a review containing multiple conditions. Although I'm looking at one, I can see what the others are, I can see who they've been assigned to and what action has been taken for the other conditions to avoid duplication or confusion for patients. Below that, I've got all of the physical checks, and you can see here that we're pulling out of the EMIS record all of those recent blood results that have been arranged. Again, these are arranged because of the settings that you've configured within the recall system, and those have been arranged. We've pulled that data out of the record and we've traffic lighted it to make it easy to interpret. We also pull out previous records as well, previous results, just for comparison purposes. And it makes it easy with the traffic lighting just to interpret those results and see where any areas of concern might be. Below that you have the patient answers to their questions. At the top here, the lifestyle section, and you can see the blue ticks indicate coded data. We pulled data from the record as well on the right here, just for simple comparison purposes to be able to see trends. And then below that you can see a patient's average blood pressure from their submitted readings, but below here you can actually see the individual readings as well. And then here their hypoglycemia history for this diabetes review. And so we've got all of that clinical data within that screen. We won't carry on with this just for purposes of time. Once you as a clinician have looked through that data and decided what, if any, further action is needed, you then have the workflow action section up here on the right. This allows you to compose a message to the patient, including using templates. You can add attachments to that message, and where relevant, for example with asthma, there's a specific asthma action plan, which is a built-in attachment to that process to allow you to edit that very easily, and that's then automatically shared with the patient. You can write a comment for the record here that's written into the EMIS record but not shared with the patient. And you can see as well any upcoming appointments the patient has within the EMIS appointment system. If you want to add a follow-up appointment self-book link, you click this button here and this is the interface that comes up. You can choose the parameters of the appointment type. You can choose a single or multiple slot types. You can actually choose single or double length appointments, face-to-face or telephone, specific clinicians or any clinician within that slot type, and also, if relevant, a specific site. And so you're giving patient the parameters that then allows them to book into an appointment of that type. And that link is then added to the message that's sent to the patient. And finally, once all of that is configured, you hit File to Clinical Record, and that then files all of this data. So all of the patient submitted data, the message, the comment, the summary document, all of the codes, as well as the details of your message and the appointment booking into the record. And so the MedLink inbox gives you a fully functional way of interacting with those patient responses and making sure that data is all into the record. However, we're aware that a new inbox and a new way of working may not be right for every clinician or indeed every practice. And so we've created a halfway house that we call autocode and email. And that means that a summary document that looks like this, instead of the data coming into the inbox, that summary document is generated straight away and is sent through to your nominated practice email address. And at the same time as that's sent, those codes are written directly into the record. So instead of your clinicians logging into the inbox, they then log into an existing workflow tool such as DocMan and look at the responses inside that interface. It means a less complex setup and no system change, and then your staff can just use your existing communication tools, but it is more limited because it doesn't have any of the additional functions of the MedLink inbox. But regardless of which system you choose to employ, and you can do that at an individual condition level and actually at an individual clinician level as well. All of that data is coded automatically to the EMIS record. And this is what one of our consultations looks like in EMIS. This has been written from the MedLink inbox. So all of the patient coded data is there. There's the copy of the document which contains all of the patient data, including things like free text, your clinician comment, education codes that have been generated for the patient, as well as details of the message and the review code itself. And so in this case, you have the entire review coded in a single consultation with both the patient information and also the clinician decision, the outcome of that review, coded as a single consultation for that condition into the record. And so when using the inbox, at least, this entire process is covered from beginning to end without any day-to-day admin input whatsoever. Runs fully automatically. Obviously it needs some initial configuration and setup, but it runs in the background, and the only part of day-to-day review is your clinicians logging into the inbox, looking at the responses and filing those to the record. If you use the autocode and email system, there's a small admin cost of attaching those documents into your existing workflow and sending them on to the relevant clinician, but all of the coding is still done automatically. In terms of overall impact, the online reviews that are available, particularly the multimorbidity reviews, really release clinical capacity by allowing your staff to do high quality remote reviews and only seeing patients face to face or following up by phone where it's really necessary. You can generate revenue with QoF achievement, and particularly with things like the NHS digital weight management cost. The communication cost is included. There is no additional pass-through communication cost, and the big impact of the automated recall system is that you can run your recall system fully automatically, and which has a significant reduction in admin burden. MedLink is priced in a way that we hope is never a barrier to patients, and for individual practices it's 11p per patient annual subscription plus VAT. We offer discounts for bulk contracts where PCNs and ICBs sign up, and we also encourage word-of-mouth referrals with a referral scheme which can add additional months to your annual review. And for new practices, we offer a 3-month free trial of the entire system, which we can get up and running very quickly. And looking at this graph, the subscription cost against just the revenue generated potential plus the released clinical capacity value generates a return on investment of something like 14 to 15-fold. We've actually not included the admin costs inside this graph. It's just a more difficult metric to nail down, but those are substantial in terms of automating the recall system. There's lots more information available on our website, medlink.co.uk, and please get in touch, info@medlink.co.uk, if you'd like to ask us any questions or would like to arrange a Teams demo. Thanks very much for your time.